Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision. It's almost like engineering, really. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
Right. It's very binary. It's either broken or not broken. It's clean, and frankly, it's comforting. We really like things to be visible and just neatly categorized.
Oh, totally. But then you step into the world of human limits, right? Of burnout and trauma.
Yeah.
And suddenly that X-ray machine is just useless. We're looking at a landscape that is super murky.
Yeah, the diagnostic muddy waters.
Exactly. And that murky territory of an 18th century priest named John Baptist de Rossi is exactly what we are exploring today. We've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources for you.
It's quite a mix, actually.
Yeah, we've got Roman tourism and architectural guides, Catholic encyclopedias, parish histories, biographical reflection, the works.
And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how this one man, who basically battled severe, lifelong physical and mental limitations, managed to completely redefine what caregiving looks like.
Right, and what human dignity looks like.
Exactly. Because the theme that emerges from every single one of these sources is the idea of a limitation as a superpower. We're going to look at how his absolute failure to be, quote-unquote, perfect is exactly what allowed him to leave such a huge mark on Rome's most marginalized citizens.
And most importantly, what that approach can teach you today, regardless of your own background.
Right?
So I think the best place to start is actually where he ended up, which is in the literal gutters of Rome.
Yeah, you skipped the glamorous route.
Completely. Because instead of climbing the traditional ladders of the 18th century priesthood, which, were very political, and Baptist de Rossi is out in the old Roman Forum, the Campo Vaccino.
And he is actively seeking out the people that polite society has just completely written off.
Right. Teamsters, herdsmen, prostitutes, the homeless, these transient cattle drivers. He even starts working at the hospice of St. Galla.
Which was a night shelter for paupers, right?
Yeah, exactly. A night shelter. And he even helps start a similar hospice nearby for homeless women. He was just drawn to the invisible people.
And the sources note that his reputation for reaching the unreachable, grew so much that Pope Benedict XIV eventually chose him to instruct prison officials. And even the public hangman.
Wait, the public hangman? I mean, how do you even approach an 18th century executioner?
It's intense.
Right. That is someone whose entire job makes them a social pariah.
Oh, absolutely. The public executioner in those days was often legally required to live outside the city center. They were completely shunned.
Wow. Just total isolation.
Total, profound isolation. So to approach someone like that, it requires an incredibly rare type of empathy. You can't just walk in and start preaching theology to the hangman.
Right, you get laughed at. Or worse.
Exactly. You have to bridge a massive human divide first.
Which brings up an anecdote from the sources that it really stopped me in my tracks. Because it shows exactly how he bridged that divide.
The syphilis story.
Yes, there's the story of a young man dying of syphilis who was completely refusing any of de Rossi's spiritual help.
You wanted nothing to do with him.
Nothing. The man was defensive. He was angry. So what does de Rossi do? He doesn't argue with him. He doesn't preach. He just quietly and humbly empties the man's bedpan.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was that single act of repulsive, unglamorous service that finally won the man's heart.
It's brilliant psychology when you really think about it.
Right.
Because when someone is dying and they're defensive and ashamed, preaching to them just creates a wall.
They feel judged.
Exactly. They feel judged. By emptying the bedpan, de Rossi wasn't just doing a chore. He was entirely removing his own status.
He shattered the wall.
Right. He proved he wasn't there to judge the man's condition, but to actually share in the indignity of it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because there's another story that goes right along with this, where he helps a youth break a severe addiction to a woman.
Yes. The laundry story.
Right. The woman was using the pretense of washing and mending his clothes as an excuse to keep visiting his house and fueling this toxic cycle.
A classic enabler situation.
Totally. And the sources say de Rossi has a brief conversation with the youth, and it completely breaks the addiction.
Just like that?
Just like that. The very next day, the young man brings the priest the giant pile of clothes to prove he's cured. Now, the text makes this sound like literal magic, but psychologically speaking, how does a brief conversation actually do that?
Well, it's not magic. It's actually the exact same mechanism as the bedpan.
Really? How so?
Because shame is the primary fuel for addiction and toxic cycles. People hide their behavior because they fear judgment.
Right. They feel like a monster.
Exactly. And de Rossi had this unique ability to act as a shame-free mirror. By meeting the youth with total radical acceptance rather than condemnation, he just removed the shame from the equation.
So the fuel is gone.
The fuel is gone, and once the shame was gone, the youth finally had the cognitive clarity to see the cycle for what it was and break it.
That's amazing.
De Rossi realized he couldn't preach to a starving or hurting person. You have to address the immediate physical and emotional suffering first.
That frontline empathy is just incredible. But I have to admit, I'm a bit confused here.
Okay, what's tripping you up?
Well, usually when people are dealing with intense poverty, infectious disease, and prisons every single day, they burn out fast.
Oh yeah, compassion fatigue.
Right. Especially someone like De Rossi, who, as we'll see, was physically frail and had a history of nervous breakdowns. How did he not just become totally resentful and exhausted by all this?
To understand how someone develops that kind of superhuman emotional bandwidth, you actually have to look at how they break. And De Rossi broke hard in his youth.
He really did.
If we rewind to his early life, the pressure cooker started when he was just a kid. He was born in 1698 in Voltaggio to poor but pious parents.
And he was really smart, right?
Extremely. At just 10 years old, his intellectual gifts got him whisked away by wealthy nobles to Genoa for an education.
Right, and the trajectory just keeps accelerating from there. Because by 13, his cousin Lorenzo, who is this powerful priest at the ancient Basilica of Santa Maria in Cosmedin, brings him to Rome.
So now this 13-year-old kid is studying at the Roman college under the Jesuits and then tackling super heavy theology under the Dominicans.
And he is driven by this intense, almost terrifying zeal. Like he was reading extreme philosophical books that recommended severe penances.
Yeah, he really went off the deep end with it.
He did. He took it upon himself to impose these harsh physical mortifications, depriving himself of food, of drink, and of sleep.
Which is so dangerous.
It is. To put this in a modern context, it's like the darkest, most destructive side of our current hustle culture, or severe academic burnout.
He is basically redlining his own engine.
Yes. He's pushing his body to achieve some idealized, impossible version of spiritual perfection until his nervous system simply gives out.
And it did give out. The sources say this extreme lifestyle led to a severe nervous depression.
And epilepsy. Right.
Yeah, it triggered the onset of lifelong epileptic fits.
So, wait. Did this physical breaking point actually strip away his ego and make him more empathetic to the suffering of others?
Yes. What's fascinating here is the massive paradigm shift this collapse forced in his mind. He had to learn the hard way that true discipline wasn't about punishing his body to achieve perfection.
Right.
It was about the daily patience of accepting his own profound limitations.
But wait, usually when highly ambitious people redline their engines like that and then they lose their physical ability to perform, they become incredibly bitter.
Feel robbed.
Exactly. They feel robbed of their potential. How did he avoid that resentment?
Because the physical collapse stripped away his ego. He realized that his intense asceticism had actually been a form of pride. He was trying to earn perfection on his own terms.
Oh, like he was trying to muscle his way to holiness.
Exactly. Losing his health forced him into a state of total reliance. I mean, his epilepsy actually threatened his dream of becoming a priest altogether.
Because of the physical requirements.
Yeah, in the Catholic Church at the time, there were strict physical requirements for ordination. Because of his condition, he had to ask for a papal dispensation.
Which is an official, rare exception to church law granted directly by the Pope.
Right. He needed that just to be ordained at age 23.
So he literally had to beg for an exception just to get through the door.
Exactly. His illness permanently excluded him from the traditional, ambitious paths. He couldn't be a high-flying academic. He couldn't be a powerful church diplomat.
His weakness forced him to the margins.
Which is exactly why he felt so at home with the marginalized later on.
That makes perfect sense. But you know, that profound sense of weakness also created a massive mental block for him.
Oh, huge one.
Because for all his bravery in the slums and the prisons, he was absolutely terrified of the confessional booth.
Paralyzed by it. For years, he completely avoided hearing confessions.
He was terrified he would have an epileptic seizure right there in the box, wasn't he?
That, or that his mind would just go blank and he would give terrible advice to someone in pain.
So what did he do?
Well, whenever he helped someone reach a point of spiritual clarity in the hospitals, he would actually send them away to other priests to confess.
It's so relatable, though. Think about the last time you were promoted or handed a massive new responsibility at work and you were paralyzed by the thought that you were going to completely ruin it.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly where De Rossi was. It is textbook imposter syndrome. He thought his brokenness made him uniquely unqualified.
Yet his brokenness was exactly what made him the perfect listener.
How so?
Well, eventually, while he was recovering from an illness in a town called Civita Castellana, a local bishop essentially forces his hand. He orders him to try hearing confessions.
And what happens?
De Rossi discovers it is his absolute true calling.
He returns to Rome and just becomes wildly popular.
Yeah. Throngs of people from all classes. They start flocking to Santa Maria in Cosmedin just to talk to him.
I read he became so sought after that the church actually released him from his daily choir obligations just so he could spend more hours listening to people.
They did. And the sources gives a brilliant window into why he was so effective.
Let's hear it.
He had a deep understanding of cognitive load.
Okay, cognitive load in the 18th century.
Yeah. He famously declared that ignorance is the leprosy of the soul. But he didn't try to cure that ignorance with dense academic lectures.
Right. He kept it simple.
Very simple. He gave very specific advice to other priests about how to communicate. He said, and I quote, "The poor come to church tired and distracted by their daily troubles. If you preach a long sermon, they can't follow you."
Makes total sense.
He went on to say, give them one idea that they can take home, not half a dozen, or one will drive out the other, and they will remember none.
What does his advice about giving the poor one idea tell us about his understanding of human psychology? Because that is staggering.
It really is.
I mean, think about modern corporate presentations or long-winded emails or even our educational systems today. We still fail to grasp this basic rule of cognitive load that De Rossi figured out 300 years ago.
We really do. We
Yeah.
just dump information on people.
Exactly. He knew that a traumatized, exhausted brain simply cannot process a 6-point dissertation. To give them one idea to hold on to.
It was incredibly revolutionary. I remember he was educated by the Jesuits and Dominicans.
He had serious academic chops.
Right. He had a rigorous theological background.
Yeah.
He could have easily flexed his intellect to impress people. But instead, he actively adapted his communication to the bandwidth of the listener.
He recognized that when someone is in survival mode, cognitive overload just shuts down learning entirely.
Exactly.
It's such a generous way to communicate. But, hearing all this, you might assume a living saint who is this empathetic and this universally sought after was just beloved by everyone around him.
You would think so.
But the sources reveal that De Rossi's most grueling trials actually came from his own family and his immediate colleagues.
They really did. Let's look at his cousin Lorenzo.
The very same priest who originally brought him to Rome.
The same one. Later in life, Lorenzo suffered a severe stroke. And as often happens with traumatic brain injuries, Lorenzo's personality completely changed.
He became intractable, right?
Yeah, very much so. In fits of rage, he actually blamed John Baptist for his suffering. Lorenzo would violently throw glass medicine bottles at John's head.
Glass balls.
Yeah. The historical texts note that John often emerged from the room bleeding.
Jeez.
Yet, he refused to leave. He stayed by his cousin's side, caring for him until he died.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back a bit on this.
Go for it.
Why stay in a physically abusive situation where glass bottles are literally being thrown at your head? Is this just a different era's view of rigid family duty? Or does it reveal something deeper about his philosophy of suffering?
What are you thinking?
Because to modern ears, sitting there taking physical abuse sounds, well, unhealthy.
It does sound unhealthy to us today. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals his core mechanism for emotional regulation.
Okay.
He was like an anchor, holding a ship steady in a violent storm. De Rossi didn't compartmentalize his charity.
What do you mean?
It wasn't a performance he put on just for the strangers in the hospitals, where he got external validation and people told him how wonderful he was.
Right, it wasn't for the applause.
Exactly. His charity had to apply equally behind closed doors with an abusive relative who offered zero gratitude. He lived by a maxim he often preached. He said, "We are not in the world to follow our own will and pleasure, but to imitate the Lord."
Wow.
He saw his cousin's brain injury not as malice, but as profound suffering, and he refused to abandon him in it.
And that radical selflessness didn't stop when Lorenzo died either.
Not at all.
Because when his cousin passed away, John inherited his canonry, which was a highly prestigious, well-paid administrative role in the church, and it came with a luxury house.
But John doesn't move in.
No. He immediately hands the luxury estate right back to the chapter, the church's governing body. He sells his own assets to buy the church a new organ.
And where does he live?
He moves himself into the attic.
The attic.
Yeah. And even after giving everything away, he still wasn't left in peace.
Oh, the rival priest.
Yeah. A jealous fellow priest in the church leadership falsely accused John of lying to get that initial papal dispensation for his ordination.
Which is a massive accusation.
It's huge. This colleague actively tried to ruin his reputation. The accusation was so vicious that John actually became physically ill from the sheer sorrow of it.
But the wild part is what happens next.
Right. When that same rival priest later fell ill himself, John repeatedly visited and comforted him.
He actively cared for the man who tried to destroy his life.
His empathy simply had no off switch. But of course, this lifelong, radical dedication to giving everything away left him with absolutely nothing at the end of his life.
Quite literally nothing. His frail health finally gave out completely. He suffered multiple strokes and had to move into the Trinita dei Pellegrini Hospital.
And that's where he died.
Yeah. On May 23, 1764, at the age of 66. And he was so deeply impoverished that the hospital was actually preparing to pay for a pauper's burial.
A pauper's grave for a man who spent his entire life serving them.
Right.
But that didn't happen. The church leadership intervened at the last minute. They gave him this triumphant funeral with the papal choir.
And the crowds were immense.
The poor, the prisoners, the marginalized, he had served for decades, they all showed up. It was a testament to his real impact.
And he was officially canonized as a saint in 1881.
But the ultimate historical irony happens in the 20th century.
Yes. This raises an important question about how we remember people. Pope Pius XII commissioned the Chiesa di San Giovanni Battista de Rossi, a massive church in Rome's Appia Latino district.
In 1938, right?
Yep. It was designed by Tullio Rossi, who was a rationalist architect. This meant the building wasn't an ornate 18th century Baroque design. Rationalist architecture is stark, functional, and deeply modern.
It was delayed by World War II, though.
It was. It was finally consecrated in 1965, which is where his relics were eventually moved.
It's just amazing. I mean, think about it. A man who gave away his inheritance to live in a literal attic and died penniless ends up with a massive modern piece of Roman real estate built in his honor centuries later.
It proves that buildings and monuments, like that stark 1965 church, serve as physical markers for intangible virtues.
Exactly.
Historical legacy isn't built on the wealth you hoard or the prestige you manage to protect. It is built entirely on the impact you have on the people around you.
The real estate wasn't the goal. It was the echo of a life spent entirely for others.
Well said.
So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? The takeaway here isn't that you need to become an 18th century ascetic living in an attic.
No, please don't do that.
Right. It's about the power of meeting people exactly where they are. It's about a willingness to do the unglamorous work, whether that's metaphorically emptying a bedpan or adapting your communication so a tired coworker can actually hear you before you ever demand someone listen to your advice.
And perhaps most powerfully, it's about realizing that your own limitations, your failures, and your imposter syndrome might actually be your greatest source of empathy.
Absolutely.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. De Rossi famously declared that ignorance is the leprosy of the soul. He was diagnosing the isolation of the 18th century.
Right.
But if he were walking the streets of our modern, hyper-connected yet deeply isolated world today, what would he diagnose as the leprosy of the soul now? Is it still ignorance? Or is it an overload of information, a constant barrage of six-point dissertations, coupled with a severe, crippling lack of empathy?
That is a question worth carrying with you into your next meeting or your next conversation. Because when you look at the diagnostic x-ray of our modern culture, you won't find a clean, jagged white line.
No, it's muddy waters.
It's muddy waters. But as we learned from an 18th century priest in the gutters of Rome, those muddy waters of human limitation are exactly where the real healing begins. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We highly encourage you to reflect on the sources we explored today, and we will catch you next time.